Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to Brain Balance TV. I just named it that. My name's Cory. I am a brain balance parent and proud brain balance parent. And next to me we have board certified cognitive specialist Heather Wells representing the Katy, Mansfield, and Texas Brain Balance Centers. And then we have Carla. I'm going to say this right. Cadorette.
Cadorette.
I messed it up. Cadorette.
Okay.
Carla Cadorette, who is not only an American Sign Language teacher, but also has a master's in education. And today is kind of a unique topic, guys. We're going to be talking about the connections between the brain, sign language, literacy, social and emotional development, and so much more. So with that, I'm gonna hand this show over to the wonderful Heather Wells, and I'll be here if you need me, Heather. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Cory.
Thank you, Cory.
We'll see how I do hosting this, girl. He's normally there with us, but you're amazing. Everybody, one other thing I want to tell you about Miss Carla is she's also my cousin, but even if she wasn't, I would want her on the show today because what she does is amazing. So, Carla, just tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you started in your career and so forth, so they can get to know you a little bit.
Okay, sure. So I started out wanting to learn sign language just because I thought it was beautiful. I was mesmerized whenever there was an interpreter at anything I went to. And so I just really loved the expressiveness of the language. And I wanted to learn it for a long time, but you really can't learn it from a book. And I didn't know anybody who knew it. And so a little ways down the line, I started teaching at a school there in the Houston area that had a teacher who was also teaching American Sign Language. I started out teaching music, and I was like, yay, somebody knows sign language I can learn. So I just kind of, said, hey, teach me,
yeah,
let's get this going. And so I started learning, and I just kind of learned between learning from him, taking some classes, just kind of, piddled around with it for a while. I met a lot of deaf people. I would go to churches that had interpreters, and I would, step up and do little bits of it and practice. And I eventually, about 10 years later, decided I really wanted to make that part of my career. And so I went to school and joined an interpreter training program. Because I thought I wanted to be an interpreter. And as I was finishing that program, that same teacher from Houston called me and said, hey, I think I'm going to start doing a different job. And so I wondered if you might be interested in coming and filling in for me, taking over my program at this private school in Houston. And I was like, yes, that sounds great. I love that idea. And so I just went straight into teaching sign language. So, through the course of my time at the interpreter training program and my time teaching, and when I started teaching there, I also started interpreting at a church and interpreting at a few different events, small events. Mm-hmm. And I just, getting to know all of my deaf friends, I recognized how much people don't understand about them.
Yes, I'm so glad that we're going to be talking about that today, because one of the things for anybody that's watching this, a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about applies to any child who has, even if they don't have acuity issues, they're not blind, they're not deaf. Some of these same experiences apply to kids with sensory integration challenges, difficulty with auditory processing or visual perception or processing, body awareness, and so forth. So we're going to talk about all of those things and make tie-ins for everyone there, although anyone could benefit from sign language. There's Kelly Strange. Hi, Kelly. Before we dive in, because we have to pick your brain for just a second, since you started as a music teacher, we have all of these parents at home that are wondering what to do with their kids, and I am providing resources, and we're doing virtual assessments and that kind of thing so we can continue to support families. But what would you say, as a former music teacher with your master's in education, what would be some good activities they could do at home to kind of nurture development during this time?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Music can really inspire kids in a lot of different ways. There's lots of rhythm activities and things are things that are interesting for kids of all skill levels, including, some people might be surprised, but there are a lot of deaf people who really enjoy rhythmic activities. And so that kind of thing, dancing, anything you're getting their bodies involved with, and especially when they're doing things with a family unit, that really build relationships.
Yeah, people sometimes don't know that the deaf community can pick up on those vibrations, and they hear the music in a different way, so to speak. That may be the wrong way of wording it because you're the expert in this particular area. But in rhythm, the ability to keep the rhythm, to keep the beat, grows a lot of critical thinking skills.
It does.
It's the same, time management, organization, prioritizing. It helps with literacy, so you can hear how many sounds or how many syllables are in a word. You can hear commas and periods. So there are so many. And when you get your motor system, we learn first in our sensory motor system, and then it translates into cognitive skills. I have been telling families, move, get sensory motor input. And that's exactly what you just said. So that's excellent. One of the things when we were talking that really struck me is, and you were just about to go into it, is how the deaf community is misunderstood. And I would say that applies to a lot of the families and kids we see who have different sensory motor challenges. We have a lot of kids on the spectrum who use sign language as a way of communicating because they have things to say, and some of the outbursts come from, I can't get my words out, and that's really frustrating. So if we have another mode of communication, that can really kind of alleviate that and get connection going at an earlier age. Those are critical moments. But let's talk some about some of the misconceptions and some of the ways, the culture that we were talking about with that community.
Yeah. So I want to back up for a second, because what you're talking about with the sensory motor, with the motor development and all of that and that frustration that happens when they can't express themselves, it's not just with kids with any kind of sensory motor challenges. It's also with, just in general, an infant, a baby.
Right.
They get frustrated because they don't know how to communicate. And so actually things that people are starting to learn a lot is, little baby signs. And it's usually actual American Sign Language. And when that baby knows how to, these kind of skills, these kind of motions that they can do with their hands are much easier for them to do than all of those little fine motor things that you do in your mouth to create the right words.
Gross motor grows before fine motor. That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. And so you're so much better at putting these into the right words.
Not at all.
So, they might start with kind of a baby version of something, just like a baby learning to speak, a hearing baby learning to speak. The mom will always be able to understand, and other people are like, I have no idea what that kid said. They do the same thing in sign language. So they'll start to pick up a sign, and they'll, let's say this is the sign for mom. They might find like mom like this, good. Asher, Kelly's son is signing. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Mom, whatever. They'll do something like that. My son used to sign more, but he would sign it like this. And to him, it meant food. So even if we weren't eating, he would still come sign to me more like that. And it really helps to reduce their frustration. And so, it's just a way that you can give a child access to communication. And that's the thing that's lacking so much. With what I told you earlier, is that actually 90% of deaf people are born to hearing parents. And so when they come into these hearing families, and these hearing parents, most of the time have never met a deaf person before this child. And now they're like, what do? I don't know how to communicate with this child. And if you don't give that child access to any kind of communication, it's so hard for them. So some of the things culturally that are important for people who are deaf is they want to know that they are being understood clearly. And so their culture, they tend to be very direct and very blunt, and they say things very matter-of-factly. things that we might kind of hesitate to say out loud, or we try to say it in some kind of a more gentle way. We use a lot of euphemisms in English. They don't do that. They really just say them very directly, and they're redundant a lot of times because they want to make sure it's being expressed clearly, because they spend so much of their lives trying to figure out, am I understanding you right?
Right. And by the way, that is an excellent point, and it applies to this. It applies in so many other ways. We also have kids who suffer with anxiety because they lack predictive skills. I don't get cause and effect. I don't understand the big picture and the details and how they go together. And so I am needing constant reassurance. And then they can say needy, which is a word you used this morning, talking about how sometimes these kids have difficulty making friends because they're trying so hard to make sure that they understand, why are people laughing? Why is everybody looking over this way? And so it happens if we are lacking acuity. I was missing a lot when I was blind. They're missing the cues that, a microphone dropped and that's why everybody's looking, or that kind of thing. But it can be because I don't feel my body, and I am missing all of the nonverbals, the facial expressions, the body language that give me so much of your message. And so this applies across the board. We talk about kids learning point of view and learning how to take on someone else's point of view. That's a super important literacy skill. Just take, the point of view of the author, the point of view of the other characters, and so forth, the point of view of my friends, my family, my teacher. But sometimes it's hard when we've not been in those shoes to take on the point of view of the one who is struggling. So can you talk a little bit more and give some of those great examples that you were?
Yeah. So some examples of what this just resonates with pretty much every deaf person I know. Examples starting from when they're a baby or a toddler and they're sitting on the floor with their mom playing with toys, and the doorbell rings and the mom jumps up and runs out of the room. And in the child's mind, a child who's deaf, they're sitting there playing, and then suddenly mommy just jumped up and ran out of the room. And now what did I do? Did I hurt her feelings? Did I do something bad? Did I, so a child, how children are, they always think that the whole world revolves around them. Everything is as a result of something I did. And so, so this child grows up, they spend their whole lives thinking that, I better be careful because the next step I make might make somebody just run out of the room, So it's an important skill to always inform a deaf person what happens, like when that microphone drops, when everybody suddenly looked there. It's just a courtesy to tell them, somebody dropped the microphone or a phone went off.
Think about, the impact that has on little ones' self-esteem. I am always doing things wrong. And Harvard Medical School talks about the importance of serve and return interactions with your child. In fact, one of the earliest things that you do for literacy is turn-taking engagement, serve and return. You make a silly face at them, they make it back to you. They make a sound, you make it back to them. So if they're not making some of those same sounds, or they're not responding the way you understand, and a lot of families, even not just in the deaf community, think if my child doesn't understand what I'm saying, I may as well not engage with them. But they're actually learning huge skills by continuing to engage. So when they get up and answer the door, it feels like the baby served and they didn't return, is basically what it boils down to. And that can really stall cognitive development, because what's supposed to happen is, okay, when I try to engage with you, you engage back. That's cause and effect. And that's a critical thinking. Well, I served and she didn't return. So now I also kind of lose that thought process too.
Right. So it's harder to make an effort anymore. I don't even want to try to be involved in that relationship anymore because it's not dependable to me.
Right. Yeah. That's really heart-wrenching. That when you were talking about the first thing you said about the doorbell, like there's no ill intention there. A mom who is not deaf is not going to think to let them know the doorbell rang unless they've been taught that. So I so appreciate your focus on teaching really the perspective of the person who is deaf. And likewise, our families, we try to educate them on the perspective. I describe visual perception and processing, what it was for me and how I didn't know things were there until they just showed up. And you feel like you live in a horror flick or 3D movie. I'm misperceiving information. So across the board, I don't feel my body. So I don't understand. I don't even tell the difference in tone of voice. And so just like you said, sometimes the deaf community is thought to be a little bit rude, and they're not. They're being direct because they need clarity. Same thing with some of our kids who are talking in what sounds like, now sometimes they do talk in a disrespectful tone of voice, but sometimes they don't know the difference.
Right.
They and even back to your music games, even drumming out beats and having different volumes can help them also understand exclamation points versus just making a statement. And that's one thing that's really interesting is you were talking about, it's not just what you do with your hands, your body language, what you do with your eyebrows is also so involved. And so when you teach kids, I have families ask me all the time, if I put my child in a bilingual school where they learn Spanish, is that going to hurt their development? In most cases, no. I mean, because American Sign Language is an official language. So if you know American Sign Language and any other language, that's bilingualism, and you are using your brain in other ways. So
glad you brought that up because that's a big issue right now. There are even professionals, medical professionals, and speech therapists and that kind of thing who still have that ancient belief that if you learn American Sign Language, that's going to hurt your English. But really, you're developing your language skills.
Yes.
So you're becoming even more linguistically skilled. It's not, historically, has not been something that's proven to, it normally actually improves the English skills.
It does. There are lots of studies on this. It improves spelling. We have a lot of kids who come in that have trouble spelling, and you have motor memory, and there are many different types of memory, but motor memory is one of them. And we talk about multimodality learning. We know that if somebody sees something and hears it, they might have a better chance of learning it than just one or the other. Well, this is kinesthetic. This is motor. And so if they're learning the alphabet and as they are reciting their spelling words, they're sitting there spelling or as they do it, that is another modality in which they're learning it. And that motor memory makes them a better speller. I mean, that's powerful.
One of the jobs that I do part-time is at Deaf and Hard of Hearing services in Grand Rapids. And one of the things we teach the parents, we work especially with parents who have a child who's deaf, or sometimes one of the parents is deaf, and kind of try to educate people on what you need to do to give equal access to everything to the hearing and deaf alike in your home. And one of the things we recommend with small children is not only to teach them the sign for something, but to also teach them, you don't have to teach them to spell it, but to kind of alternate between signing the word and spelling the word. So, if we're going to say door, and we're going to also spell it, because there's actually something about the shape of the letters that still connects to the shape. I know it doesn't look exactly the same, but it does connect. And when you see apple and you see the shape of the letters, you can see some of that, and it helps you to connect that to the actual spelling of it.
That is fascinating. That is so fascinating. And we have a ton of families out there who have kids with visual perception and processing issues. Most of the time when they come in, they don't know that's what it is. Right. But sometimes they think their child has dyslexia, which sometimes that is the case, but instead it's vision and processing. But paying attention to those details of what the hands are doing, of what the eyebrow is doing, the facial expressions, where on the body you do the sign, you are really helping them hone in on body language. You are working on their visual discrimination, which is part of our visual perception. They're all the sensory motor, you're working memory in a different way. I talk all the time about when you move, you're stimulating the brain. This is so, there is a huge rise in the number of people learning American Sign Language, even if no one in the family is deaf. And they might be language delayed. They might be on the spectrum. It is another language. It grows lots of cognitive abilities. It has been shown. I'm not huge on teach to the test. I know schools are kind of forced to do that, but just to show how it does help with growth is that there have even been shown to be higher scores on those tests for the kids who learn sign language. It is like whole body and brain development. The body and the brain are intertwined.
It is. It's huge. And for kids who are deaf, really ASL is the only, not ASL, any signed language. American ASL is specific to the United States and Canada. It's not international. And that's what a lot of people don't understand. And
hey, working from home, hon, that's what happens. It's all good.
So what people don't always understand is that it's not an international thing. It's American Sign Language is used in the United States and in some of Canada. Most countries have their own sign language, but sign languages in general are the only languages that are really completely accessible to a deaf person. And so deaf people can learn.
Can I use your shower?
Go tell to stop, please. Deaf people can use that language to learn everything. I mean, we have a University for the Deaf in Washington, D.C. called Gallaudet University, and you can get your PhD where everything is taught in sign language. And so it's a complete language. Everything is accessible. You don't have to use an interpreter. You don't have to, so people don't realize that you can teach everything in sign language. It really is complete.
Right. Oh, thank you, Chuck. That is my friend I grew up with in Alabama, one of my best friends.
Oh,
thank you so much. Yes, and they need accessibility. It is not about, it needs to be about inclusion, and this applies not only just to someone who can't see like I was, or someone who is deaf. This is to anyone who is struggling with social emotional development, or they're struggling with sensory motor challenges. We have to put on, we're teaching them point of view. We have to take on their point of view because they are living a different experience than we are. And I know that's easier said than done. I know that because I've been the mother thinking, what am I doing wrong? But I learned from that, and I learned to give myself grace. But I hear that from families all the time. They think it's their fault. It's not your fault. It's just, these are things that you don't know until you know them. Know, and so I love that you are doing these online classes. It's just, you're making it accessible, this kind of information. I want to talk a little bit about background knowledge.
Okay.
So a lot of the people on here have heard me talk about background knowledge. We are those are the building blocks of our lives. If I am facing a decision, at my age, it's probably not the first time I faced something like that. Well, I say that, and then we have COVID-19 going on. So I just proved my own self wrong right there. But so many things we face, we've had some derivation of that before. So I'm facing the situation. I am going to think about what happened last time. This part of my decision went not so much. So I need to redirect that part of it. I may reach out to you and say, hey, Carla, here's my situation. What would you recommend? I am going to combine all of these things to help inform my decisions. If I'm reading and it's about a baseball game, I'm going to think about when I went to see the Houston Astros play, and I'm going to pull something in about how fun that was and the sound of the crowd and the taste of the food. But I've used the example when I was blind, I didn't see the color of the water. The ocean waves were overwhelming because my auditory was trying to overcompensate that my equal vision weren't working. The kids who don't have hearing and don't know about that doorbell, they don't know why people are laughing and people don't think to stop. You had a really powerful couple. Let's pick one of those stories to share that I think really drives this point home. And this applies to any kids who are having developmental challenges that interfere with them knowing how to use background knowledge in life.
Yeah. Which story would you like for me to tell?
I think the one about the neighbors who used to play together.
Okay. So there is an author, and I need to find out what her name is, a deaf woman who wrote a book, and she came and spoke at our interpreter training program when I was there in New Jersey. She grew up in, I believe it was in the Bronx, and she she was the only deaf person in her family. She didn't have any access to any language. She did not know sign language or any language at all. And in fact, when she was 12 and she finally went to school where there was somebody who knew some sign language, at that point, she still didn't know her own name. Wow. Because that's background knowledge. You hear that. You hear your own name, and that's how you know what your own name is. You know, someone, if someone's deaf, then they only know the information that's given to them directly, you know? And so all these things, when she started school, they would ask her, you know, who is that? And she would say, that's him, this, and she'd just do a sign name, and they're like, who is this? Is this your uncle? And she doesn't know. She just knows that it's this. She doesn't know what his actual name is or anything. But she had a cousin that lived like a couple of blocks from her, and they used to play together all the time. Their families got together and regularly, at least once a week. And then for a while, he didn't show up to play, and she kept wondering, where was he? When was he going to come back over and play? And then her family got everybody dressed up, and they went over, and she was so excited they were going to go, because she could tell as the direction they were going over to his house. And they got there, and everyone was dressed in black. Everybody was crying, and he was laying on a table, and she could see him there. And she was thinking, when is he going to get up and play with me? Because she thought he was sleeping. She did not have any concept, any understanding of what was happening there, and stayed there that whole period of time, looking at him, waiting for him to wake up. And then their family packed her back up, and they went back home, and she never understood. And it was weeks later before it ever got across to her, because she was still asking her mom, where is he? You know? And it was weeks later before she understood that he had passed away, and she had no way of understanding. She had no realm of reference, no frame of reference to figure out what the circumstances were. And we all, as you hear the story, you know what's happening very early in the story, because you have all this background knowledge to put together. But she didn't have any of that, and so she just was caught completely off guard and unaware.
Thank you for sharing that. That is one of the most profound depictions of kids lacking background knowledge that I have ever heard. And I've been doing this for decades. And that just knocked me to my knees when you shared that. So if you have kids out there who the sensory motor environment is not making sense to them, they may have equilibrium issues, and you may not know it. They may complain of their tummy hurts, they're dizzy. A lot of these kids are avoidant of motion, or they seek it all the time. They may have body awareness issues. I don't feel my body the way you do. And so even your nonverbal communication is a foreign language to me. And I don't know where I am in space, so I'm not going to learn spatial concepts. It can be the visual perception and processing, the auditory processing, touch, smell, taste. I may not internally, I may not know when I'm hungry and when I'm full and when I need to go to the restroom. And I'm embarrassed because I'm 9 years old and I still sometimes wet my pants.
Yeah.
We have got to give these kids a voice in some form. I always talk about giving a voice, and a voice can be American Sign Language. It does not have to come from the larynx. We have to give communication. We have to fill in the blanks for them. And it's just so easy. It's kind of like with my neurology background, when I go to present seminars all the time, I think about who's in the audience. I'm not any smarter than them. It's just that I have different background knowledge than what they do. They know way more about most things in life than I do. But I'm sitting there thinking, are they physicians? Are they teachers? Are they parents? Why are they sharing their time with me? And that is going to adjust what I present and how I present it. That's going to bring value to them. We kind of just have to do that all the time for any of these kids who are struggling and not assume they know things. We have to take kind of 3 steps back maybe and think. And I know that it's not automated at first, but once you start doing it, it becomes very automated. And the reward of having that relationship in a child who is flourishing and not depressed and not having poor self-esteem, not thinking that they're not worthy of engagement. American Sign Language benefits anybody who learns it. And knowing about the culture, when you hear all of this talk about, the United States is a melting pot, and we have people from all other countries, but this is a culture too.
It is.
Yeah. And so appreciating that diversity. And I talk about Publishers Weekly quite a bit, and they put out lists of books that they recommend. They have so many books on very specific topics, including diversity. And so that would be such a fantastic thing to do in the downtime, is to find books about diversity and about kids who are deaf, about kids from other countries, or whatever it is, because you're also, when you do that, you're broadening their horizons. You're helping them understand same and different even. And it's okay to be different, and celebrating those things. And then that translates into it grows their cognitive abilities when you do that. It's going to help them with literacy, because they also have to know, how are these characters alike? How are they different? Compare, contrast, predict what's going to happen. How are these kids going to predict when the world around them is not making sense? So I know it's time for you to get to dinner with your family. Is there anything else you want to share? I'm so grateful for you coming on here.
I feel like we could just go on and on forever. One thing I know is a lot of parents carry a lot of guilt around too, because they have not in the past done what they needed for their child, or given their child what the child needed. But the parents often just don't understand, and they don't know how to look at it from that angle. So, look for resources. And I'm so thankful that you, Heather, are providing these kind of resources through your brain balance centers, because, we don't know what we don't know. And
right.
there's no way we can have an expectation of people trying to do this perfectly. But what our goal is for everybody to actually at least be making an effort. Look for what it is that your child needs, and look for what resources you have around you. So, because you can really make a big difference. And when your child sees that you are making those kind of efforts, it still is very meaningful to them to understand that you're trying.
Yes. It is what we say at Brain Balance is it is about progress, not perfection. Yes. And I want any parents out there who are thinking it's my fault and I'm doing a bad job. No, you're not.
No.
My parents did not know I was blind for years. I had huge tumors on both optic nerves. They did not know it. They gave me a bike and I rode it. And I punctured my saliva gland and ended up Blacktop Hospital. But if I can be blind, if I can have tumors in my brain for years and years and years, and the doctors are just saying I'm stupid, and nobody knows, doesn't it make sense that you haven't thought of every I and T? You don't know what you don't know. And it is about we are here as a resource for you. Feel free to reach out to me at hwells, WELLS @brainbalance.com. If you want information on this, and Carla's the expert on American Sign Language for sure. If you have kids who have any sort of sensory motor challenges or learning challenges or literacy or math or spatial concepts or trouble with friendships, reach out to me, because I have a wealth of resources that I have created and collected over 30 years. And I have a whole lot of very smart friends like Carla as well that I can reach out to, so we can support you and let us know what your needs are during this time and really always. So thank you so much, Carla, for sharing your time. And thank you to everyone out there watching. We're really grateful for you sharing your time with us. And I will be back on Facebook Live tomorrow at 3:00 with Dr. Brian Aspie, and then every Tuesday and Thursday at 3:30. And so thank you so much. If you have any comments or questions, I will be checking those later. And anybody who didn't get to watch this live, watch it later and reach out. We'll monitoring this. Thank you so much, Carla. You are awesome.
Thanks. You too, Heather.
All right. Cory,